Hello, this is Mary Collar Did It, and I am going to talk to you about how to know God's will. And knowing God's will is really not very difficult because He tells us so much about Him. He reveals Himself in His Word, the Bible. Excuse me. And also, He revealed Himself as He is through Jesus when He was here on the earth. Okay, so today I'm going to look at 2 Samuel chapter 18 verse 33 and chapter 19 of 2 Samuel verses 1 and 2. Sorry. So I'm just going to read these. And to preface it a little bit, King David had a son who was in conflict with him. The son Absalom. We're not going to go into the history of him, other than to say that he was David's son, and Absalom, wanted to kill his father and become king. And so there was a war between them, fighting. And Absalom ends up getting killed. So what we're really looking at is, what was the response of David towards his enemy? And his enemy happened to be his son. So in 2 Samuel chapter 18 verse 33 it says, "And the king was very moved, and went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he went, he said, 'O my son Absalom, my son, Absalom, would God I had died for you, O Absalom, my son, my son.'" And then in chapter 19, verses 1 through 2, this is the response of the people towards what happened. "And it was told to Joab," and Joab was the captain of the army. "It was told to Joab, 'Behold, the king weeps and mourns for Absalom.' And the victory that day was turned into mourning unto all the people. For the people heard it said that day, how the king was grieved for his son." Okay, so when we look at this, King David's great enemy was his own son. Now we can think about our own children if we have children, or other relatives if we don't, and how, well, let's not even look at ourselves. Let's just look at people that you might know that are in conflict with their children. Some of them just as soon not see them ever again. And there's such animosity that between child and parent, that if one should pass, the other might rejoice. So obviously, Absalom, if we look at this, it is not God's will for there to be conflict between parents and their children. But human nature says there is. So God didn't change Absalom's heart. Absalom was who he was, and he was anyone who would want to, kill their parent to become powerful. I mean, there's lots of instances of that. So we know that Absalom was not really a very good person. But David was his father. And whether he was good or evil, David loved his son. And how do we know that David loved his son? Because he grieved so badly. He would have gladly taken Absalom's place. Would God that I had died for you. So why didn't he? Well, because that's not what God had called him to do. But what God did call him to do is understand the depth of love that one can have for an enemy, especially of one's own household. Obviously, who is this a picture of? Well, it's a picture of God the Father having enemies, his own children, his own creation. And would God that I had died for you. That's exactly what he did. He died for us. You know, God grieves. I think the first mention of the grief of God is when he destroyed the earth by flood. It says he was grieved that he had made man, because the thoughts and actions of man was evil continually. He grieved that man should become so evil. But getting back to David, it was God's will that we grieve over the sins of our family, of our children, of others. That we grieve over that. And how do we know that this also demonstrated the Lord's will? Because the people themselves grieved with him. They were victorious for a while. It was a day of victory. Their enemy was defeated. But they loved David. And so they grieved with him. So grief is God's will, isn't it? To grieve out of compassion, out of forgiveness, out of this deep feeling of sadness, even when our enemy is defeated. Think about it. We have lots of enemies. Some near and some far away. Our government can be our enemy sometimes. Our leaders can be our enemy. You know, our family members can be our enemy. And was God's will. I mean, they went to battle. It wasn't, God didn't not allow it to happen. It did. And the whole response was, how do I respond? How do I respond to my enemy that I have to go to battle? Do I rejoice in what's happening, or does it grieve me? Do I rejoice in their defeat, their loss of life, or does it grieve me? So think about those things and Try to understand God's will in your life, the people around you who might be your enemies. Thank you for watching.